G'day folks, Andy here from Aussie Homesteads, and we're doing part 3 on how to wire the light bar up to a car. And in the last video, in part 2, we did all of the loom, which was all the wiring that you can pre-buy. And we briefly discussed the relays, and I've taken the relay off of this little connection. If you look back in the last video, you'll see that that was connected to the ground of the car. And there's also an inline fuse. This is a 40 amp 12 volt relay, and this is rated at 40 amps, and it's just a 4-pin connector. They come in 4 pins, 5 pins, 6 pin, all different types of pins for different jobs. This is just a standard relay for wiring of lights, and it clicks into that fitting there. Now let's discuss why you need a relay. What does a relay do? How did it get those stupid numbering system underneath it? So let's start with the relay and the fuse. So the relay works by having inside there, and I'll take the cover off in a minute, we'll go right through this. And inside there is an electromagnet, and when you apply power to 2 of these terminals out of the 4, so that's 2 of those pins down there, it activates the little electromagnet, and it causes a little plate to come across, and they've got contactors on them, and that completes the circuit. And these things can repetitively do it, and they can handle high amperage. Whereas if you remember, I discussed that the switches, they don't like high current. They're on the low current side. So if you continuously keep doing that, it's going to fuse these switches up. So they just get really, really hot on the contactors, and they melt together. So to get around that, you use a relay. Okay, so the relay, let's start and have a look inside it. So get a screwdriver and you can lever the side of them off. And if you have a look just inside here, you'll see in the middle there a copper wire wound rod, and that forms the electromagnet. So one side of the power goes into that little electromagnet, and the other side is on this little plate, and it just clicks on, clicks off. So all it's doing is pulling that contactor in, and down on the bottom of that contactor is 2 little tiny, like little buttons, and when they push together, it completes the circuit. So that's lights on, lights off, lights on, lights off. And you heard in the last video, you could hear it click. It goes click, click, click. Just look in the last video, you'll hear that sound. And that's how these things work, and they're extremely robust. I believe they were invented by Bosch, and Bosch have been making parts for cars for, well, decades really, and German engineering, of course. And this is just a cheap Chinese rip-off of it. Everybody makes these relays now. But they got the silly numbers, and if you have a look on a wiring diagram, they have these numbers on them. So you've got 30, 85, 86 and 87. They've all got different numbers for different jobs, and each one of these will go to the high side or low side, and it switches across the 2 or switches across the other 2. But how did they get those stupid numbers? Well, it was called the Deutsche International Numerae. Don't quote me on that. The name's irrelevant, but it's the German mob that numbered all the parts for cars. And they found that when they'd finished numbering all of the parts, they were left over with the relay, and they thought, well, hell, we've just buggered up all the numbers. So they were left with number 30, 85, 86 and 87. It's a shame they didn't have 84, 85, 86 and 87, but they didn't have those numbers left. So they just used 30, 85, 86 and 87. And if you look up on the internet, you'll find that those relays, that these are 4 pins, they all have numbers printed on them. These cheap Chinese ones don't. And the reason this one doesn't have numbers printed on it is because it can only fit one way into that loom. So you can't really get it round the wrong way. So you don't need to know the numbers on these ones. That's the advantage of buying a pre-bought loom. Alrighty, so now we've briefly discussed the electromagnets. Let's give you a bit of a look around it. You can see how it clicks on, clicks off. Just that little plate moves in, closes the contactors. Right, let's get on to fuses. Why do we need a fuse? Well, what we do is we need a fuse on the high current side, because we want this, hopefully this 10-cent fuse is going to protect the whole unit, because we want this fuse to blow before anything else does, because these little blade, that's a blade style, and it's called a blade because it's got 2 blades on it, and it pushes into the little housing in there, and it just pushes in. And these are all rated by colour, and they're rated by the amperage that each one can handle. So this has a 30 amp fuse because this is a 40 amp relay. and we want this to blow before this. Okay, so if you get any moisture into your system, into your wiring, or you get a surge of power, it'll blow, hopefully, that 10-cent fuse. And in my past experience, it's never blown the fuse first. So that's a 30 amp fuse. It's green. Now they're all color coded. So you've got 40 amps, which is that one there. It's a sort of an orangey color. And this green one is 30 amp, clear's 25, yellow's 20, brown 7.5, etc., and you get down to 5 amps. And of course, they've all got different jobs. They'll all blow at, say, that'll blow at about 6 or 7 amps. So you can't handle much more than that because inside them is a tiny little filament, and it's really hard to see. So I'm going to try and see if I can shine it through the torch here and see if we can see. Just in between those two blades is a tiny little filament, and that little filament can only handle the voltage or the amperage that it's rated at. So this brown one is 7.5 amps. So if you put 10 amps through that, it's going to blow it. Now, the advantage of these blade ones, we used to use these glass ones, and these glass ones have the filament running through the middle of them between these two contacts. So it would be current passes through here, through that little filament out to the other side, and that's what makes the contact. As soon as it gets more amperage than it's rated for, when they're written on the end of it, this is probably a 10 amp. So if it gets 15 or 20 amps, it's going to blow that tiny little filament that's running through the middle of it. It's a very, very fine wire rated to the right amperage. Disadvantage of those is you had to take them out to test them. But you'll find that these blade style, if you look right on the very end there, you'll see that the blade goes all the way through the plastic. And what that does is allow us to do is to use a multi-tester, or a multimeter if you want, and we can put that onto continuity. Now, when we join these two wires, these two probes together, you'll hear a beeping sound. So what we'll do is we'll get this across those two contactors. Hopefully I can do this with one hand. Hang on. And we can test it in situ. Hear that sound? That means that this one is a good one. So I didn't even need to take that out of the holder to be able to test it. You can manually pull them out and hold them up to the sun. You can see that tiny little filament in between those two blades. Is it good or is it bad? If it's blowing, there'd be nothing left of it. I briefly discussed last time in the video, you can get these ones with little LED indicators on the top now. And when the filament blows, the power is then diverted to the LED, and the LED shines. So you just be able to open up your fuse box and have a look, and one of them inside will be glowing. It'll be just a tiny little LED. And I'm going to get some of those and we're going to demonstrate them, but that'll be in another one. So that's basically what we've got to do that. So let's turn that thing off before it beeps its head off. Now, let's discuss wires. When we got this loom, I briefly hinted in the last video that the wires that are in it, because of the price of copper now, they're actually going for copper-clad aluminium. So it's actually an aluminium wire, but it's being bound in a copper coating. Nowhere near as efficient as the good old copper wire. And that one there, this blue one, is a pure copper wire. See how it's that coppery colour? And all the fine strands. But if you have a look at this other one that came with the loom, it's a silvery colour. And there is an actual test that you can do, because some of them are really sneaky. They copper clad them so that you can't tell that it's aluminium. But there's an easy way to tell. And if you use a lighter and heat up the copper wire, see how it doesn't droop? It doesn't get all melty? But if you do the copper clad aluminium one, see how it gets all droopy and hot really quickly. And there, see, it's starting to basically really quickly melt down. And some of the really poor quality ones, they'll just basically fizzle away to nothing and they all droop over and get all droopy. Whereas you can keep putting the heat onto the copper ones and they don't tend to bend. So that's another quick way that you can tell the difference between a copper clad aluminium wire and a pure copper wire. But the price of copper worldwide has gone through the damn roof. I mean, scrap copper is now worth a fortune. And it's another way of making money off grid is getting copper wires and stripping them down and selling back the copper, or getting the copper out of wire. It's another thing that I do to make money. But that just shows you the difference between copper-clad aluminium and pure copper wires. So that's basically why you need a relay, basically why you need a fuse, and how they got those silly numbers there. So there you go, folks. That's this part done. We'll be getting on to another part. We're going to actually physically mount this light bar onto the car, and instead of running it through the switch as a manual on-off, we're going to wire it into the high beams. And that way, when you throw your high beam stick on and you turn your high beam lights on, this one will automatically come on. But that will be the next part. So I hope that helps someone. It certainly might answer a few questions about confusing about these relays and how they got that number. Well, just remember, it's the only numbers they had left. So that's how we ended up with 30, 85, 86 and 87. That's Andy signing out from Aussie Homesteads for this one, and we will catch you up on the next one. Hope that helps someone. Bye for now.